What is up, everyone? This is Andy, and I'm here to give you some of my favorite selections as we enter the Pick'em contest over at No House Advantage. We've been entering this contest all season long. We've been doing well, sometimes not as well as others, but I think on this conference championship weekend, we got some nice picks headed your way. And if you haven't played in this contest before, you still got a couple chances left. You got this conference championship weekend, you got the Super Bowl, and there's no better time than now because for a limited time, No House Advantage is going to match your first deposit up to $100 as long as you're a new user. How do you access that? Just use the link in the description of this video. And over at No House Advantage, you got two types of contests. We're taking part in the Pick'em contest where we're going to be looking at player props affiliated with these players from the games on Sunday, and we're going to pick over or under. The more that you get right, the higher you rise in the standings and get closer to that top prize. There's also a second kind of contest called Versus the House, where you pick any 5 player props across all sports, and if you're right, you're going to make up to 21 times your money. It's a great, cool new fantasy platform that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to do. They show you a picture, you go over, under, 5 right, 21 times your money. That's the Versus the House. Today's the Pick'em, so why don't we start picking them? So the first thing I'm going to start with is Christian McCaffrey. Nursing a little bit of that calf injury. Did you see the amount of work he was getting in the second half of that game in a closely contested game against the Dallas Cowboys? He was only coming in on third downs in the fourth quarter. He missed practice. So we could be looking at a potentially limited Christian McCaffrey. Maybe not. Maybe if they were trailing in that game, he would have played more, and maybe he practices and is going to be fine by Sunday. But on the off chance that he's even remotely limited in terms of his snap count, like if it's even reduced by 25%, I'm going to take that advantage on No House Advantage. And then when you couple that with the fact that the offensive line with San Francisco, they struggled with the defensive front of the Cowboys, and they could be facing something similar with the Philadelphia Eagles. Not an easy team to run against. Just ask Saquon last week. And I'm going to take the under on Christian McCaffrey's rushing yards in this particular game. But that doesn't mean things are going to get much better for Miles Sanders. I'm also going to take the under on his rushing yards. When you look at the number one front in football and the San Francisco 49ers, I'm going to take the under on Miles Sanders. Usually, if you're going to move the ball against San Fran, it's going to be through the air. I don't particularly see Miles Sanders doing a ton on the ground. Tony Pollard was able to get a little bit before he got injured in that second quarter, but he's a little bit more explosive than Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders usually needs to churn them out over the course of a game. And the worse the team is that they're playing, and the more that they get up, the more he seems to accumulate those chunk yardage plays. But against the San Francisco 49ers and that defense, that's a pretty tall order. So I'm going to take the under on both Miles Sanders and Christian McCaffrey. So both running backs going under in my book. All right, you don't like the fact that I'm taking 2 unders with running backs? Then why don't we take 2 overs with running backs? I actually like the over on Joe Mixon rushing yards. Did you see this makeshift line of the Cincinnati Bengals against the Bills front last week? I mean, Mixon was just ripping off runs all game long. It wasn't even like it was in the second half, like, all right, well, now let's start running. From the first quarter straight to the fourth, and they were making the case that when you have backup offensive linemen, it's actually easier to run the ball. It's putting less on their shoulders. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true because we've seen multiple backup offensive linemen look like garbage, and that's not what the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line looked like last week, albeit backups or whatever. So I'm going to take the over on Joe Mixon rushing yards because that's a juicy total coming off a great game running the ball. And then also on the other side, this is one of my favorite guys every single week because they refuse to up his total, and that's Isiah Pacheco, who was one of the main reasons why the Chiefs got up last week and were able to win that game. He was a crucial piece of the pie. He's obviously their most dynamic runner. I know they have McKinnon, but that's usually through the passing game. But when you're talking about surpassing a rushing total in the 50s or high 40s, you gotta like Pacheco's chances. And then we obviously have Mahomes. I know he's trying to fake walk it off and fake jog in practice, but there's a whole different vibe when you're on that field and trying to sprint at full speed. I think they're going to have to run the ball. I think they will try to run the ball to protect Mahomes as much as possible. And Pacheco's a good runner. Look at him in some of these games. He has chunk yardage gains in a bunch of these. He's hit his over on rushing so many weeks in a row. I have no choice but to take Isiah Pacheco over on rushing yards. So we got 2 in that game over on rushing, 2 under in the other game. So my 5th pick is going to be T. Higgins over on receiving yards. He's waiting for his playoff breakout performance. We know he's capable of them. It seems like the Bengals, every time you start to get laser focused on one of those 2 massive receivers, it's the other one who breaks out. And we saw what Jamar Chase did these last couple of weeks. Tell me this ain't a perfect spot for T. Higgins against the Chiefs. We know he has like wide receiver 1 type of quality. And now, because maybe a little, I don't even want to call him hiccups. He looked fine these last couple of weeks. But we got a lower total for T. Higgins, and in a game where you know they're going to be throwing. Look how they've played the Chiefs these last couple of times. All 3 ended up in wins. All 3 ended up with chucking, and I'm going to take the over on T. Higgins receiving yards. And those are the picks that I got for you as we take part in one of these final pick'em contests during this 2022-23 NFL season. If you don't like any of these selections of mine, head over to Stokastic.com. They offer free projections and optimal lineups for No House Advantage contest. So check those out and also subscribe to the channel here. Greatly appreciated. And I will be back with you tomorrow to talk versus the house, where we're going to try to pick 5 of these and net up to 21 times our money. Take it easy. Have a good one, and I'll see you tomorrow.